Alrighty, thanks for everybody coming out today. I would like to start with a person. Let's call her Maja. Maja is a project manager at a mid-size Danish office. And 6 months ago, her manager came to her and said, I have a new project for you, move offices. Maja doesn't know very much about furniture. She knows much less about moving, but she takes it on as one of her many projects that she does. If you're anything like me, when I started this company, you would never be able to guess that the most popular office chair in Europe costs over 1,000 euros new. It's wild. Maja didn't know either. But here's how it played out. Digital infrastructure. In the first month, she reaches out to a real estate agent to get a new space, signs a contract, and then moves on. Month 2, 3, 4, she's working with architects, designers, planning out the new space, who's going to sit where, and what furniture they're going to sit on, the newest designs, styles, etc. They lock in the furniture in month 3. Because there's long lead times, things need to be manufactured, shipped all over the world. Then in month 5, she walks around the office looking at the furniture and she thinks to herself, why couldn't we have used any of this? And what am I going to do with it now? Well, it's a little late. The new furniture contract is locked in. Things are probably already going onto trucks. So she just moves on. In month 6, the movers show up. A lot of waste is generated. So, good morning. My name is Ian. I'm the co-founder of Circular Furniture, and we move tens of thousands of pieces of furniture around the world every year to keep them in circulation. And the framing, as Patrick described, is the digital infrastructure as the backbone for the circular economy. And I'll be talking a lot about furniture, but the mental models and the network, try and look at those maybe instead of the actual furniture, because you might be in a related category and a lot of the problems and the solutions are very similar. And my basic argument is that the normal flow of throwing away and buying new is not necessarily a market failure. The buyers exist, the Majas of the world exist, but the infrastructure to connect those two actors at scale is yet to be built. Oh, new slide. Okay, so scale, what are we talking about? When we look at the furniture industry, we can look at it from one perspective of saying, okay, how much furniture is bought in a year? And you might, you get the estimates of 110 billion euros of furniture is bought every year. But actually, a better number is to think about what is the furniture that exists today. There's over 100 million workers in commercial spaces across Europe, and each of them is surrounded by thousands of euros worth of furniture. That means that the install base, or what exists, is hundreds of billions of euros, if not $500 billion euros. So with all of that inventory, why is it then that less than 7% of furniture gets a second life and 90% of it ends up in the landfill? What we see is that this install base, which is mostly used, a lot of it unused, and a lot going to become unused because commercial real estate leases are getting shorter, and on average less than 12 months in Europe now. We have hotels, doing renovations. We have schools. We have hospitals. Everyone is doing, relocations and moving. There's a lot of changes, and also we know that there's a lot of, downsizing happening in the market. Employees are moving out. All of these workspace changes, we say, create a furniture decision. And that is decision-making process is broken, causing less than 7% to get a second life. But why? People want it, I should say, people want it in a soft sense. So we have people who are incentivized by cost or by CO2 goals, but they, at the first sign of friction, it's just not enough volume, not the right timing, it's slate gray instead of gray, they default to new, right? So the secondary market needs to be able to produce a level of trust for buyers to know, okay, am I going to get what I want and as it's represented, and can I get it at the volume that I need it? And so I talk a lot about more of like the business side of it. I'll draw some parallels to the consumer market as we go along. But when we talk about scale and needing to be able to solve big problems, this is what the secondary market needs to be able to provide. And we see this as a network problem. And networks are not necessarily just pushed into existence with regulation. They're built over time. So, why don't these networks exist today? I would say that there are three things missing for these networks to operate at scale. Number one is the data. There's just no digital identity for all the furniture that exists today. Number two, even if that data did exist, the role or the person accountable in the organization to manage that data doesn't exist. And then the third element is the market. So if you have the data, you have the role. Is there an actual market that can absorb the surplus at scale and help recirculate? Now, they have different solutions and different problems to overcome, and there's different drivers of change, which we'll talk about. But in general, the first data problem is driven in, change is driven through regulation, where we have things like ESPR and DPP, and this push from agencies to ensure that data is created in a transparent manner. The second role we see is actually driven more from internal policy and incentivization in companies, right? And I'll speak more to that in a minute. And then finally, we see operators like Circular Furniture are the ones building that market so that things can be recirculated. And I will speak about all three, but I need to change the slide. There we go. Let's talk about the first one, data. If you want to run a global network of used furniture, it would help to know what's in the network. That sounds obvious, but it really just doesn't exist today. And when I think about data, I think about it in three phases. So the phase one is we have the birth. And this is something that the manufacturer would own of, okay, where was it made, how was it made, who made it, when it was made. And this is where regulation is helping, ESPR, DPP, et cetera, to help. But it basically almost creates a little bit of like a birth certificate, if you will. Then we have the second phase, which is unironically the first life of the item, where the owner is updating the data of, okay, where is it? How has it been used? Has it been repaired or changed in any way? Is the warranty still good? Etc. And this is mostly missing. I mean, there's a couple of big companies that manage this for furniture, but 95% plus don't. It actually is quite surprising. And the third element is, of course, the secondary market, or the second life of this item. So who wants it? How much are they willing to pay for it? And where does it need to go? So these are the three phases of the data that we need to make the network work. And we have regulation that'll really help in some of the first phases, but the second and third phases, which are actually the phases that determine whether something will be repurposed, largely still need to be built and figure out how we're actually going to do that. Now, I want to say that there is a lot of progress made and a lot of upcoming regulation that will support. I mean, when we get to know eventually on every item where it was made, when it was made, we understand what the repairability of it is. We know where we can get spare parts. We know how we can manage warranty with the manufacturers. These will all be instrumental in the subsequent phases of the data that we need to make sure that we know what it is and we can recirculate it. And that is great progress. But even if we get that data, we are still missing something. And that brings me on to the second missing element of the network. So, if I were to wave a magic wand and say that all of the furniture in the world has the data, all of that information that I just explained has the data, would anything change in the company? At least for furniture, probably not, because their role does not exist to leverage that data. And I'll draw a parallel to, for example, laptops and mobile phones in businesses. There's usually, even in our company, that's kind of 1/14 of my role, is to be the IT asset manager and know who's got the mobile phones and laptops and what condition they're in and everything like that. And when you have someone that owns that asset and there becomes a surplus, okay, there's an extra laptop, they go through some decision-making processes or prioritization of what to do with it. And usually the very first thing is, okay, let's reuse it internally. I've got employee 1 that just left. I've got employee 2 coming in. Can I just move the laptop over here? Okay. But maybe that doesn't happen and say, okay, I can't reuse it internally. Let me sell it. I think it's worth some money. I'll sell it on the market, recoup some of my value. But sometimes they can't sell it, so then they say, okay, donate it. I can't get any financial value from it, but maybe I get some ESG, some societal value, marketing value. And then if I can't donate it, then I would dispose of it or recycle it. And good asset management goes through this process of understanding all of the cascading priorities. What we see is generally that furniture just skips to number 4. And it's not because somebody looked at 1, 2, and 3 and said, yeah, those just aren't interesting to me. It's just because there was nobody that was incentivized to ask the question, can I reuse it? How could somebody else reuse it if I don't want it? And they're not motivated or driven to ask those questions. Now, we do see this working in, for example, the buyer side. So when you incentivize procurement teams, for example, we see this increasingly more in larger companies and in communes or municipalities, public institutions here in Denmark, where an internal policy is generated to, hey, you need to reuse at least 30%, or hey, you need to save 20% of costs on this office move, or internal policies driven by finance or procurement. We do see those shifts, and those are our customers that come to us to buy used furniture, are those that have gotten some internal policy push to say, hey guys, I need you to save money, or save CO2, or save the planet. And so it does work when those internal policy pushes to a role that then owns that asset class. So this is a choice that largely is made by companies to create incentivization of buying used and reusing as much as possible. So if I were to wave another magic wand and say, okay, we have the data, we have the role, what is missing? Well, we would say what is missing is the market. As we said, when you go through those phases and you say, okay, I want to sell something or I want to donate it, if you don't have a secondary market to actually absorb that, then you're not recirculating anything. You end up just recycling it. So when we look at primary markets, which are like the new shoes and the new TVs, everything new, basically, they have spent decades, creating discipline in their supply chain to understand where demand is, how to price it, what are the variations. Nike for sure can tell you how to price a pair of shoes in Berlin versus how to price it in Copenhagen. If they were to sell a big piece of machinery in London, it would be different in February than it is in October. They have spent decades trusting and building this data to understand how to move as much product as possible. When we look at the secondary market, we largely have none of this at scale. And so what we need to do is to avoid, or move away from this pricing by gut, moving with relationships, trusting each other by handshake, and creating a more structured and data-driven market. And This is somewhat of a mindset shift. If we were to take an example of an office moving, and we would see a lot of our competitors would go into that same thing and say, okay, what can I take to make the most profit? Knowing in my head I have a certain amount of space in my warehouse, and I know the people that I would sell to locally. And so it's like a constraint mindset. And what we would do in turn is to go to that same thing and say, okay, given everything that's available, how can we take everything, or most of it, and then find or create the demand to absorb it? And the reason that we do that is so that we can understand and help build the market using the data of, who wants to buy it, when they want to buy it, and what price. So what we would say is that globalization has built the linear economy, but the circular economy needs it just as much. And that's what we try and do, is to try and create to get the data for the demand globally, and make sure that the buyers can start trusting in the network, which will take time. So as the data and the role are pushing into the market, the buyers are understanding that they can start trusting in what they're getting, like the couch is actually 147 centimeters and not 154, and it doesn't fit into the office door, that they can get things at scale and the time that they need it, and that they can have a relationship with somebody that they trust in that market. And this will be built by operators. It's not to say that it's easy and that, we'll just do one AI algorithm and it'll solve everything, we'll be able to recirculate it, etc. These are markets, when we look at the primary markets, they've been built over decades and have taken a lot of time and data. We need to start that process and build those complicated pricing algorithms. We need to understand and do demand sensing globally. We have to start it if we want the circular economy to work. So, here we go. So, we've talked about 3 different layers. We've got the data layer, where we have compliance, record keeping, so we understand what exists and where it is, how valuable it is. And we know that regulation is helping with that first phase, the birth certificate, but there's more work to be done in the second and third phases of understanding how it's being used and where it can go next. We've talked about the role, and this is where we have internal policies and incentivization schemes that need to be created so that people reuse and repurpose things that exist. And then we have, of course, the market, and this is where operators understand where can things move in a secondary market, how do you build trust with the data, and then you help circulate things. These layers are sequenced, and no one company owns all of them, right? These are things that need to be built together. There we go. So, it would be unfortunate if I didn't plug my own company in the speech. So, we are Circular Furniture. We help companies get visibility of what they own. We help them through that decision-making process of, okay, what can you keep, what can you reuse? And then we help manage a network that allows businesses to buy and sell used at scale required. And, we have some happy customers, and we save them some money, and they help solve the planet. Now remember Maja from the beginning. Maja is a real person. And what I told you was actually what could have happened. But what actually happened was that Maja called us in the second month. We went out, we registered her whole office, about 100 people, a couple thousand pieces of furniture, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of euros of new purchase price. And then we used the opportunity to go through the process with her and her stakeholders, the architects and the designers and real estate, what to keep, what to sell, what's valuable, what's not. And what ended up happening? Well, she kept 50% of what she had. She sold 40% of it. And they gave 10% to Berlin. So in that scenario, even that 40% sale offset a lot of costs for that moving project and made Maja look really good along the way. And this is what we hope to create in these scenarios. She didn't have to become a furniture expert. She had the data through the registration. She had the incentive in her role, sort of augmented by us helping her in that execution. And then there was a market that was able to absorb what she didn't have. But we are just one company. And there are thousands and thousands of Majas out there. So this is something that we need to build together. And there's no winner-take-all scenario. And we think that furniture ends up into the landfill not because nobody wants it, but because the infrastructure doesn't exist to connect the people who have things with the people who want things at scale. Other categories, the electronics and automotive, textile, manufacturing equipment, they have similar problems and potentially similar solutions. So my hope is that today we can have a discussion on how we make progress together to solve it once together rather than a million times alone. Thank you.
We now want to zoom out, and I do want to invite our other two panelists on stage. So we have Anne-Marie Jensen from HP to discuss